Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Zane Donani doing the Tight 10 again. Let's get going with the latest news and notes and analytics. All right. So first up, we have this graphic that I created from Fantasy Points data using average separation score, just to highlight like which teams had the worst average separation score last year. We call that ASS. These were the bottom 5 teams last year, and it's basically just a summation of all the receiver scores, the tight end scores, the running back scores, and whoever else leaked out on routes. And Pittsburgh was the only team with a negative score, which is really hard to do. But it just goes to show you, like, all of these teams made some sort of investment or significant investments after being so terrible at having separation last year. You can see the metrics here, and then the tweet here. Steelers added Michael Pittman Jr., great separator. They also drafted Jeremy Bernard. Saints added Jordan Tyson. He's a great separator too. DJ Moore, pretty solid depending on the route. Isaiah Likely, okay. And Malachi Fields. And then the Jets added like 3 or 4 different guys back to their room. So Omar Cooper, Garrett Wilson, A.D. Mitchell, Kenyon Sadiq. So a lot of guys. So I'm expecting this to turn around for those teams quite a bit. Moving on, nowadays with how things are being reported during this slow period, there's not as much news to get to. So I'm digging further and further, like trying to look back at things, listening to podcasts, looking at random news and notes, and even reading articles that I may not typically read. So this one was about Fernando Mendoza, really just talking about how he's really learning from Tom Brady and how Brady's really applying the Peyton Manning path to him, which doesn't mean he's going to play early like Peyton Manning did, but just kind of like, guys, what we need to do is you need to be the most competitive, the toughest, and earn the locker room, and really slow play him to make sure that there's a good development plan in place. If you guys recall, Peyton Manning had a terrible rookie year. I think he threw more interceptions than touchdowns. Came back the next year, obviously having like Marvin Harrison, eventually adding Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark, etc., helped out as well. Baker Mayfield is likely to sign a contract with the Bucs. Just important for dynasty owners to know that he's probably going to stay on the team. And then for the people that are also looking into Buka and Jalen McMillan and even Chris Godwin, Ted Hurst long term. And that Sam Darnold's also likely going to get extended. There was some more Jaden Blue buzz, but it really is kind of the same stuff that we keep hearing, where it's, hey, he's doing a little bit more, taking on a little bit more. He worked with Dak Prescott on pass plays after practice one time during OTAs. Shoddy said it was night and day for him between 2025 versus 2026 offseason so far. He's working on pass pro, and he's going to be a huge part of what the Cowboys want to do as long as he keeps working at it, which is great. So I just think he's got his own role. He's going to be a complimentary back in this backfield. And he would maybe get a little bit more work if Javonte were to miss time. Brock Purdy's fully healthy after dealing with turf toe last season. That's really important, especially as we look at his mobility. He might be able to take off and run a little bit more. He's also really good at out of pocket throws, so it's important that he's able to do that. The Broncos are hoping that Jalen Waddle will open up the middle of the field. Which he will, because he's just really an elite route runner. And then DJ Moore, the Buffalo Bills added him because they were so bad in man coverage, and they believe that he'll be a good man coverage beater, which he's okay. He's better than what they have, which is good. Kevin Stefanski really valued the tight end position, and he spent the offseason getting to work with Kyle Pitts and ultimately decided to reward him as a core piece of the offense. In previous reports, we also heard that they were going to be doing a lot more 12 personnel with Charlie Warner. Charlie Warner is not a target earner, so what ends up happening then is you basically start dividing those targets into 4 players that are running pass routes. And, that means Jahan Dotson or Zachariah Branch or whoever else is the other guy. And so that just creates more consolidation towards Pitts, towards London, and towards Bijan. And I think that all 3 of those guys are going to have major receiving seasons. the Packers are seeing Marshawn Lloyd as more of a cherry on top of the cake right now. They're not like building him into the plan long term just yet. That doesn't mean that he won't be in the plan. It's really just about the fact that you can't really trust a guy that has never stayed healthy and has only played in maybe one game in his career. And so they're just not getting their hopes up. They're going to take whatever he does as kind of extra and work him in. He would be a great complimentary back from all that I see. So we're just going to play it by ear, see how things go during training camp. Hopefully he's still healthy. And then Tucker Kraft confirmed that he'll be on the training camp pup, but they expect him to be back for week 1. Commanders are still going to be thinking about their wide receiver by committee for wide receiver 2, unless they sign a veteran, which I think they still will. Patrick Ricard is expected to play a lot for the Giants, and what that means is that there's just going to be less wide receivers on the field. And if they trust Neighbors and Slayton to be their 2 wide receivers, those guys are going to be heavily targeted when you add a Patrick Ricard onto the field. Patrick Ricard, when he was with his previous team, he was on the field for roughly like 20 to 25% of pass plays. So, that's really boosting guys like Neighbors and Darius Slayton and Isaiah Likely and their abilities to receive targets, because unlikely that Patrick Ricard will receive many targets. George Kittle, for all intents and purposes, is going to be healthy for week 1. He might not play in week 1 per se, probably week 2, but I think he'll be playing. Colts roster update, nothing special there. We can move on. There's mutual interest between the Jaguars and Parker Washington to get an extension done. It really comes down to negotiating the details. There's more on that that I had from yesterday, so we'll get to that. The Texans, they want to be more balanced from an offense perspective on their run-pass splits. Also, they talked about how they want to bring in more 12 personnel. They wanted to go more 12 personnel last year, and actually watching and charting the games, I had some time to think about this, but they went jumbo a lot, which means that they played like an extra tackle or guard or whoever like out there. And it was kind of unique because you wouldn't see that from other teams. And I think the issue with that was that they did a lot of run plays out of that because they didn't have like a reliable way of, it wasn't like a believable pass set, if you will. So I think having all their backup tight ends plus the one that they drafted healthy and adding Foster Moreau, like now they have the ability to run that 12 and 13 personnel, which will hopefully boost more for Jaden Higgins and for Nico Collins. They also want to increase the tempo on offense, per the report from the from Aaron Wilson. RB2 for the Colts is up for grabs between DJ Giddens and Seth McGowan. There's more on that later. Not conclusive enough on Alec Pierce's injury recovery or exactly what Josh Downs' role is. But we'd like to hear that Alec Pierce is on schedule. And then we want to hear that Downs is going to be playing on the outside, but they did insinuate that he is going to have a bigger role, so that's good. Ashton Doolin, again, wide receiver 3 confirmation that we keep hearing, unless they sign Keenan Allen, which we keep hearing also. Jeremy Bernard, versatile. He can line up inside and outside. That would help because that means that Michael Pittman could play in the slot. He's lining up all over the formation. They also called him a big slot, so maybe a split between him and Michael Pittman for that slot role at times. Right now he's competing with Roman Wilson, and it is my belief that he'll win that job based off of what I've read, but it is notable that Roman Wilson has been with the ones most of the time. Eli Heidenreich is on the roster bubble. He needs to work on pass pro and special teams. The Broncos probably aren't going to bring back Marvin Mims. Kind of exciting, actually, because I'd like to see him go to a different team and maybe have more of a full-time role. But for now, he's just kind of like a rotational wide receiver 3 and return man. His value is at like $10 to $12 million. Kyle Pitts' contract was basically a 2-year deal, one more year than the franchise tag. Stefanski and coaches really like dug in and observed him and realized that he was super detailed oriented and dedicated. So I just think he's going to be a focal point for the team. I think he's a really good value where he's going right now. So Michael Wilson's basically saying that, hey, contract extensions talks are going really well with the Cardinals. He wants to be paid as a 1,000-yard receiver and stay in Arizona. Now that's, is what it is. But that does impact how you would think about, from a dynasty perspective, his value and Marvin Harrison Jr., especially as they probably don't have the quarterback of the future on the roster right now. And then you're talking about dealing with a rookie quarterback for 2027 and how complicated that can be for fantasy. And you may not see any sort of returns long-term until, the following year, 2028. The Bengals, we keep hearing it, want to go under center. They want to do play action. They believe that being under center was going to open up more explosive runs for Chase Brown, which is true. And then it will give more credibility to the run game and will open up easier explosives in the pass game as well. So they want to do play action and they want to run from under center. There's a report by John Shipley on Parker Washington. There's a good chance Washington's numbers hit career highs in 2026. He had 850 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2025. So, if he does more than that, that's probably above his value based on where his ADP is right now. Most of the guys that go where he's going are, if you just do like a median projection, is like 800 yards. So Patriots wide receivers, this report said that A.J. Brown looked like A.J. Brown. Nothing weird with his knee or anything like that at OTAs and minicamp. So that's great to hear. Kayshon Boutte would like to stay on the team. That's not great for guys that want, other players to be in the mix for that team. And also we would like to see Kayshon Boutte go to a team that needs a receiver like the Commanders, but that's just kind of is what it is. He wants to stay. And then Romeo Doubs was a mixed bag at camp, made some nice plays, but was pretty inconsistent. On this Denver podcast, the reporters kind of like went through Mike Clay's projections. There's 2 on these. There's another one that was about Evan Ingram. And they kind of went through like the J.K. Dobbins situation, and they were basically like playing it out as if Dobbins was going to have the exact same role that he had last year. And so they were like, 1,000 yards is probably like a fair projection as long as he plays 12 to 13 games, which I thought was interesting because in my head, that means like, okay, he's going to get like something like 12 to 15 rushing attempts every single game, maybe a reception. And that's kind of like what his role will end up being. Anyway, I really think he's a great value right now based off of that. This article solidified that Chris Godwin's going to play in the slot. Ibuka and Jalen McMillan are also in the top 3. And then Rondé Barber also thinks that Ted Hurst is actually like pretty good, which I think means something. But again, there's also always crazy hype and stuff too. I'm still skeptical that he would play a lot without like someone getting injured, but there's 3 guys that could get injured and then he could step into a role. Again, skeptical that Marvin Mims plays past the season. It's a great article on AJ Barner. Basically, like, he's a do-it-all tight end. I actually think he's really good, underrated. If he was on a different team, I think he could do more than what he even did last year, which was like 500-600 yards. But he's a full-time tight end. He's critical to Seahawks' success. They like having him in. He makes them multiple. Played through a ton of injuries last year, and he had 2 off-season surgeries, but he's going to be fine for camp. All that basically just makes me think like Elijah Arroyo, very highly specialized role for 2026 at least. NFL insiders, they talked about Puka Nacua. He came back from rehab and everything says like things are going well there. There was another report by Adam Schefter today that talked about how Puka Nacua is doing journaling and how that's helping him keep himself on track. Josh Allen said the main difference with Joe Brady being head coach is that he cares more about the defense. So to me, that signals that there's really nothing that's going to change on the offense. Probably lean run heavy again. And then Tutu Atwell said that the Dolphins basically have the same playbook as the Rams, just with different terminology. And it'd be great if they had the Rams players, but they don't. So still expecting them to be pretty bad. Go check out my podcast that I did with Dwayne McFarland. Honestly, one of those things that was just like a dream come true for me. Like, I've been listening to Dwayne McFarland for years. It was super cool to be on. We went through every single team and what I think about the different players and news and notes and everything like that too. Okay, I mentioned this earlier, but this one podcast that does Broncos content went through Mike Clay's projection on Evan Ingram, and they thought that Ingram could do more like 500 yards receiving and get back to 10 yards per reception. And that he might take one target away from Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, or Marvin Mims, that he has a better relationship with Davis Webb, that he'll include him more, and they'll play with more pace in general, so that means that they'll have more plays to potentially get him in. A lot of drumbeat on the Commanders saying that the team is going to be multiple and move guys around. This one was from Ben Sinat. Ryan Flournoy is getting a ton of hype again. Cowboys are going to be in 11 personnel primarily. He's going to be on the field a ton. I think he's a great pick at his ADP because he's basically a wide receiver handcuff, and there might be big games out of him anyway. Just if teams try to like double Pickens and then for some reason CeeDee Lamb like isn't getting open as much, Ryan Flournoy might do a lot. You want good players and good offenses. The Raiders traded up for Mike Washington. They thought of him as an ideal complementary back to Ashton Jeanty. I'm still skeptical that Jeanty will not be a bell cow. I see this as more like, hey, this guy's just going to step in and basically spell Jeanty from time to time. This one was big. It was on the Bucs running back and rushing scheme. Basically, they were the reporter Rick Stroud, who covers the Bucs, went on and said Gainwell's contract is not backup running back money. They're going to go with the hot hand. So that means like in a given game, like whoever's doing well, they're going to give them more of the load. And then the scheme is switching to outside zone. He also thinks that they don't want to give Bucky 15 plus carries, which matches what I've heard from all the other reports that are different Bucs insiders as well. So I think that Bucky's at just not a good pick right now. I think that he should be falling back towards after Bashal Tutin at the moment in my mind. But I know others think that he's incredible. Like, he had a great rookie season, some crazy efficiency metrics. The thing that I've found with efficiency metrics is that they just don't really hold up. It's really a product of offensive line. And if the team's scared of giving him touches because of his shoulder and his mental health issues, and Gainwell's doing a lot in the pass game, and then he's an adequate running back, which I think he is. I actually think he's an above average running back. I think that there's ample opportunity for Kenneth Gainwell there. Commanders are going with the wide zone rushing scheme. Again, Scott Barrett tweeted this, but Bill is a much better zone rusher than Rachaad White. Vikings running back room, this was pretty big. I went to vikingsterritory.com, started doing research on like what do people read and listen to that are fans of the team, so that I'm not getting like bad sources. And this is one of the websites for the Vikings. So the writer here said, the Vikings rolled into the regular season with Jones and Jordan Mason as the main running backs. That's happening again. And this time it's a complete mystery about the true running back one. No one knows who's going to take the first handoff from Kyler Murray or J.J. McCarthy against the Packers in Week 1. So that is what's going on. Jordan Addison is basically going to play a deeper threat role again, and deeper threat roles are not good for fantasy, not even spike weeks. You'll see that in my latest article that's coming out for fantasy points in the next couple of days. Thank you guys for listening. I hit 1,000 listens. I honestly can't believe it. This was my fun meme for Joe Brady before and after he took a step back, and that's pretty much it. Mike Evans had no restrictions in the offseason. That's good to hear. He's fully healthy. OC Brian Fleury for the Seahawks, longtime 49ers assistant, isn't bringing a new offense with him to Seattle so much as he's putting his own touches on what the Seahawks ran in their lone season under Kubiak, who's also from the Shanahan coaching tree. Good to hear. I think we're going to see some more two tight end sets, which has some implication on how much Elijah Arroyo plays, but yeah. Again, Purdy's fully recovered from his turf toe. He's been practicing with guys like Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, and Deshaun Stribling. We're going to see Carson back in 2026. This is one of the reasons why I'm going to fade a lot of the Cardinals players, because I just don't want to deal with that in the fantasy playoffs. Keep seeing more about Jadarian Price, George Alani, and Emmanuel Wilson basically being an RB by committee. The Seahawks replaced Walker by spending 32nd pick on Notre Dame Jadarian Price, backup in college who was slated to share time as a rookie with George Alani and Emmanuel Wilson. Alani, who impressed the Seahawks with his fill-in work in the playoffs after Charbonnet went down, has 25 carries over 2 NFL seasons. Wilson's a power back. Okay, great. The Raiders seem unlikely to want to sign a veteran free agent wide receiver. They want to see their young guys out there, see what Trey Tucker can do as wide receiver 1, with Naylor being the other starter. Jaguars running backs, basically, like, it sounds like the coaches want to not give away what's going on a given play, and Chris Rodriguez does do that because he doesn't do any of the pass catching stuff. Might be a decent pass blocker, haven't really observed that, but doesn't do the pass catching. And so, me just kind of reading between the lines, it seems like this is all set up for Tootin to do a lot and could play like that Bucky Irving style role from Liam Cohen's offense in 2024. But it's up to him. He needs to show it, and if he does show it, he can earn more and get that lion's share. I think he has the talent to do it, but that doesn't mean that he will. So we'll see. Matt Stafford is due for massive TD regression. I got a Scott Fishbowl invite. That's great. Jalen Waddle is going to play both slot and outside per Sean Payton. This was interesting. And I think it's really important for people to know, because explosive plays are what wins fantasy matchups. And explosive run rate is any run that goes for 15-plus yards. Basically, explosive runs are dictated by how many yards before contact you get. And I broke this down, and this was the cut point that I saw at 6 yards. Basically, once you get 6+ yards before contact, which means you're at probably beyond linebacker depth, that's when explosive run rates really pop and take off. And so my thought process with all of this is you just need you need to invest in good O-lines. And that's the thought process with drafting running backs. We don't always know which teams are going to be the best O-lines, but this kind of just points you to yeah, sure, J.K. Dobbins was probably a little bit higher on all of these. Some other guys might have had a little bit of an outlier performance here or there, but for the most part, your running back is hamstrung by what their offensive line does. We saw it with Gene T last year. If you get a bigger hole, which Travis Etienne did on a lot of his big plays, then you're going to see things like this happen where they're just having big spikes. Someone brought up in this mailbag that the Miami wide receiver room was kind of interesting, that they have Tutu, Malik Washington, and Kevin Coleman, which are all small guys. So the writer was yeah, they can't really play all three of those at the same time. So they're going to have to put in Jalen Tolbert or Caleb Douglas with two of those guys, or maybe even both of those guys with Malik Washington or Tutu or whatever, because you can't run a functional offense with that many small dudes on the field. So that's just interesting. I think Caleb Douglas is actually going to play a lot. Some weeks Roma Dunes will be a main part of the game plan, and others he'll be a decoy. I started digging into some Colts beat writer podcasts, and saw that the Colts believe it makes sense, the beat writer believes it makes sense for the Colts to pursue Keenan Allen. He would play more of a specialist role, like third downs, which is actually very similar to what he did for the Chargers last year. He could play outside, he could play inside. He's really versatile in being able to do so. Better at a slot role, but whatever. And then they mentioned that he has a relationship with Shane Steichen and Rivers from his time in San Diego, so that that's all very interesting and kind of piles on to why he might join the Colts. But in the same podcast, they talked about how Josh Downs can play the Z, and they'll rarely have him go against press man. They'll just have him off the line of scrimmage. They'll put him in motion, do all sorts of fun things to make sure that he doesn't just get jammed at the line of scrimmage. Jonathan Taylor needs 1,629 rushing yards to surpass Edgerrin James for the Colts franchise lead. There's no guarantee that he'll be back beyond 2026. Seth McGowan versus DJ Giddens. Thought this was interesting. If Jonathan Taylor was out of the game, they feel DJ Giddens would get the rushing workload, and that it's a training camp battle. Seth McGowan's more like pass pro, short yardage, stuff like that. I'm going to wrap up after this one. On Rashid Shaheed, so ESPN was talking about this, but basically he had a big spring with Sam Darnold. We already knew that from previous reports, but this was interesting. He's going to run some of the routes that JSN was running, and then he'll do some more short to intermediate routes. Short routes and intermediate routes are more valuable than deep routes. They get targeted more. They have more fantasy points, expected fantasy points per route. This would be huge for him. I think that he's a very good value in fantasy at the moment. All right, that's all the time that I have. Thank you guys for being with me for the Tight 10 today. Like, subscribe, share. Appreciate it.